Alright, so this week in Evergreen, things got a bit spooky. I started by cleaning up something that was getting a bit messy in my head and in the code. The line between biomes and darkness zones was starting to blur. Originally, I had things like the ancient grove treated almost as if it was a separate biome, but that just didn't feel right. So I pulled that apart again. Biomes and darkness are now two separate systems, as I intended them to be. A biome is a physical environment, a forest, a swamp, a mountain, a desert, whatever. Darkness zones are more about progression and danger. That small distinction actually cleared up a lot. The ancient grove makes more sense now as a gated zone rather than a full biome. And I added unlock tracking to the world state so progression through these zones can be properly tracked throughout the game. Basically, less confusion, fewer future headaches, always a win. And then came the fun part. I added the first version of a brand new biome. It's been a long time coming. The swamp. Right now it's very rough, definitely placeholder territory, but the foundation is in. And with the swamp came a new enemy. Originally, it was a witch. I built a generic enemy scene so that I can reuse the same underlying logic for future enemies, bosses, and whatever horrible creatures I decide to implement later. And then I mocked up the witch. Basic art, rough sound effects, simple projectile attacks. Nothing fancy, but just enough to get the gameplay working. And honestly, this enemy immediately made combat feel more interesting. Instead of just running up and bonking something with a stick, you now actually have to pay attention. Positioning matters, movement matters, not panicking also helps. The witch started with one spell projectile, but I expanded that into 3 attack types. First, a heavy orb attack, slow, dangerous, and it hits hard. Then a rapid fire volley attack, a bit more chaotic, and finally my favourite, the panic attack mode, where the enemy gets to low health. It basically starts freaking out and sweeping projectiles all around the area like, get away from me, which I found weirdly funny. I also added a proper death effect instead of just instantly deleting the enemy. I just borrowed the spawn and flee effects from the Wandering Trader. Now that I think of it, he disappeared out of the game and I don't know why. I mean, I never meant to remove him, so he's going to be added back in this week. But anyway, she just poofs out of existence and it just feels much nicer. I also fixed a really annoying scene transition bug. Sometimes when leaving an area, the player would just spawn in the wrong scene entirely. Not ideal, but after a bit of digging, it turned out to be an ordering issue with the map exits and spawn markers being processed at different awkward times. Literally about a quarter of a second during the scene load. Sometimes game dev is elegant engineering. Other times it's duct tape and prayer, and this week was a bit of both. And then by the end of the week, I had a bit of realization. The witch didn't feel right. Mathematically, great. Thematically, nah. It felt too generic. It spawned from swamp biome, witch enemy, Minecraft, you know. And since Evergreen is heavily inspired by the Irish countryside, folklore, and that slightly eerie feeling of old places, I started thinking about Irish mythology and then it clicked. She's not a witch, she's a banshee. And that feels way more evergreen, way more rooted, way more unsettling. So the witch is officially gone. Long live the banshee. I've started redesigning around that idea, and I also added a new item drop called the Banshee Wisp. That'll eventually come the fuel source for the Iron Tier torch, the one beyond the one that lights up the ancient grove, which ties nicely into the darkness system and progression as well. So yeah, a solid week, a new biome, a new enemy, new combat mechanics, and a bit more identity for the world. Evergreen is slowly starting to feel less like systems stitched together and much more like an actual world. And that's it for this week. If you'd like to follow along with this journey, please hit that subscribe button and I'll see you in the next devlog. Thank you for watching.